knowledge as to what if they culled the number they culled in 2008, 2009, and 2010 from some pretty big numbers to 3. What was the rationale behind it? Is there, and it doesn't match up, I think, with in my mind, with the counts that we had, from the flights that you had reported on that they've done. So I haven't digested all that yet. I mean,
Last year and this year, Ryerson counted 0 deer in North Ryerson. And Tim Pruce told me personally in private conversation, he said that the deer population had gone down and he suspected it was because of harsh winters in 07, 08, and then 08, 09.
I was just curious what those kind of explanations were. In my view, deer fences is just one tool to look at. If you go to Direne's house, she's got a little different approach. One of the things that's interesting, you can see it right out in front of the village hall, is the work that Sheila's people have done out there. The fencing arrangement has changed, and you don't see the canopy. The trees are going to be canopy plants individually fenced off anymore. You see some broader fences for the lower shrubs and things. The trees themselves will grow past the deer problem. Okay, the larger shrubs and understory plants will grow past the deer problem. But plants that don't go past the deer problem are the ground plane plants and smaller shrubs and those sorts of things. So there's kind of separable issues, along those kind of ways. It's not. I think it's. To Trustee Smotik's comments, I think it's kind of easy. It's kind of difficult to you're never going to please everybody. I think that's the thing, and I think it's some basic decisions have to be made. That said, what is our goal? What are our real goals in the deer management program? Obviously, Woodland Health is one of them, but are we managing it for the benefit of the deer, for the benefit of the people? Because there's a lot of other factors in the health, as we've learned, the health and vigor of our woodlands. It's not just the deer. It's the hydrology, it's the soils, it's the species compositions, it's the invasive plants, it's all these different issues. The shade issue, because all of that plant community is based on shade factors. So we had done over the years we had 2 grants. We had a grant from Department of Conservation, what they used to call it in those days. And basically, it was we did a study on this property. We had control plots, sample plots, we fenced things off, what did the deer eat, what did the deer not eat, and all that sort of thing. We had another grant, it was a federal grant, studying site hydrology. And we had sample points at the village hall, at Linda Dunn's house, at Small's house, and there might have been another one, I can't remember what it was. But what we found, we were trying to see if there's any correlation that we could determine between the movement of the seasonal water table and development. Kind of hard to extrapolate to that. What we did find out was that in a very short period of time, the seasonal water table in this area will fluctuate from, it could be at the surface one day and 11 to 13 feet down the next day. Pretty severe differences in that short time period. So that's another very important stress factor in the ability of the trees to deal with all this stuff. The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind, the Riverwood plant community is generally reflective of plant communities that are associated with waterways. Because this whole soil structure, this whole area is influenced by the glacial process that created the river. So I think it's important to take a look at that and understand that this is not prime territory for oak hickory type plant communities. It's marginal. It's a marginal, and you always have these areas around areas that are better elevations and better drainage. And so it's a little more difficult for some species, take a white oak, for example, to survive here for a long time and be very healthy. You can take a white oak in this town, and you'll be well served if that white oak gets to be 85 to 95 feet tall, and if it lived for a couple hundred years. You take that same plant, put it in Pennsylvania, it'll be 130 feet tall and live for 800 years. So there's all these things that go into it. And I think it's not an easy decision to say how we balance all these things out. But I think we could do a lot more to improve our deer aside by managing some of the things that Rich has talked about before. The shade issues, we've met with residents that have asked us the question, what do we do? And I've issued permits to one lady over by the mayor's house, for example, to take out a whole bunch of sugar maples in her yard. And I recommend she prune some trees to create better light and shade variables on her lot. So, what's the incremental impact of each one of these things? It's hard to say, if you quantify it exactly. But I think the ones you can't change are the ones related to soil. They're not changed easily, and hydrology, and those kind of things. The other ones you can manage a little more. So that's just kind of the way I look at it. I think one of the things, one of my aesthetic values is I think it would be a shame if everybody looked at the fence ordinance the way it is today and put up a 6-foot fence at their property line. Like, that'd be a real shame, but that could happen. Okay, and it may be marginally effective for the deer problem, but with a little landscaping added, it could be pretty darn effective to the landscape problem, or to the deer problem. So I think that's just my take on it. And like I say, I wanted to explain how I view my role in relationship to the decision process. So.
Yeah, I'd like to just concentrate on this one issue of herding, because I've heard some of the trustees say, well, aesthetics is not really the issue. Sherry, you said that herding is the issue. If you take out
I said I did not say herding is the issue. I said aesthetics was one of the issues, but that herding was the issue that set off this whole procedure, was that residents were calling and complaining that the deer were impacting their lots because their neighbors had been putting up fences and pushing.
Let me comment on that.
Okay, but that was how this started.
This issue came up, and let me quote from the Plan Commission, because this was the one wildlife expert that they asked. A resident asked, "We have a large deer population. It's starting to change the forestry riverwoods. The assumption is that if people take their deer fences down, then yards that don't have fences will have trillium again and oaks sprouting." Again, this is the resident speaking. I think what you're saying is that if the fences are taken down, then the fenced properties will look like their neighbors who never had a deer fence. And then the answer was, yes, they will definitely, and then there was an unintelligible thing. There was some noise in the background. The resident reiterated, then they will not regenerate in other areas. And Marty Jones' answer was, I don't think so. That is, if you remove the deer fences, will that allow the non-fenced areas to regenerate? His answer, I don't think so. I'd like to add, I toured around the village. Let me finish, Bill. I toured around the village in South Riverwoods because I think that's the primary area that is of concern. I think that Russ counted 31 deer fences in South Riverwoods, and that's west of Port Wine Road. I counted 33 non-deer fences. I went to the map and I calculated the area. If we removed all the deer fences in South Riverwoods, that would increase the real estate available to deer browse by 18%. Does any of us think that that's going to have a significant effect on trillium sprouting up in non-fenced properties? I don't hardly think so.
No.
The last thing that I'd like to say is that with this issue of herding, we've talked about deer fences, but nobody has commented that an ordinary fence also withdraws real estate from potential deer browse. Nobody's talked about the fact that if you have turf, deer don't browse effectively in turf, so that's also removing a real estate. We've concentrated on deer fences, but we've totally neglected regular fences, turf. We've neglected dogs that are outside. They will push deer onto other property. And we've only talked about the one thing. That's why I believe this thing is not crafted properly. It does not address what it purports to address.
We haven't talked about turf grass and we haven't talked about dogs because we can't regulate those. People have a right to have turf grass.